Now to the second and I think last session on energy efficiency, moving on from the public sector to something more scalable, I guess. We look into the changing practices in energy efficiency. We have with us a mixed panel. We have developers and experts from the region and also from outside, and we'd like to have an introspective look at what has been done outside and what can be brought to the Middle East. Now, as you know, energy efficiency investments in the EU and in North America, for example, have saved billions of dollars. I think one estimate by the IEA has put it at 550 billion in 2014. The Middle East obviously is an emerging player in this. We can see what we can learn from outside and also what indigenous models we can develop here in this region. So on this panel today, we have to my right, Azmi Aboul-Hoda. He is the Publicity Chair of the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating and Air Conditioning Engineers, UAE chapter. He also leads Emergy, a privately held corporation that specializes in built environment field with focus on energy saving solutions. We also have with us Ridah Sabouni, who is the Efficiency Lead, Clean Energy Business Council, and Managing Director of Mena Energetics. We also have with us on the panel from Belgium, Leen Govaerts, who has more than 15 years of experience in policy-orientated research on sustainable urban development. And at present, she is leading the research unit, Smart Energy and Built Environment, that deals with sustainable energy and urban sustainability. We also have with us Nada Chami from Saint-Gobain, UAE Habitat Committee. She is a sustainable construction specialist with more than 10 years of experience. She has experience in Paris, where she did her PhD in building insulation and energy efficiency. And Nada joined Saint-Gobain in 2010, and she's worked with their R&D building science team for 3 years. Welcome to the panel. And let's begin. We've just heard from 4 panelists earlier about strategies for energy efficiency savings in the UAE, as well as in a new market, Saudi Arabia. And that is from a public sector perspective. How can we scale that, and what can the Middle East do from, taking out from the experience of established players outside? If you can share both international experience and how it can be implemented here. And I'll start with you, Azmi.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I'm very delighted actually to be here, part of this summit. Internationally, actually, this movement towards energy efficiency started maybe around 40 to 50 years back. And here in the Middle East, the wave came around 20 years ago. And this is a result of an industrial revolution which has started 300 years ago. And we are actually now trying to mitigate the results of this industrial revolution, and which took place around 300 years ago, and now we are in the for 30 to 40 years trying to mitigate this the results of these in terms of climate change and other environmental aspects. So the international aspect, of course, they are well advanced in this regards. Here in the region, we have the UAE, which is also advanced in adopting the strategies required to tackle the energy efficiency issues, and to adopt the standards and the regulations, and to follow and to have some collaboration with the European and the American movements in this direction. So as, for example, with regards to standards, we have many standards which are being implemented here in the region, and which are being used and mentioned in the local regulations, in Istidama rating system, and in Dubai green building regulations. and other Emirates as well with regards to energy efficiency, indoor air quality, and other standards. So we are moving towards this direction worldwide, and we are focusing here in the region and in the UAE in specific in this direction. Of course, there are lots of work to be done, and we are still in the early stages, I mean, worldwide and locally as well, in having, implementing a coherent and across the board of energy efficiency measures, which can be really, which can lead actually to the results which we all are looking for.
What is your perspective on this, Ridah?
Yeah, so I mean, I think first things first, I would say you need to follow the money in a way. So if you look at this region, going back to even to 2010, subsidies, energy subsidies were anywhere from 15 to 30% of government expenditures for the GCC countries. And so now you've been seeing the last few years, these subsidies have been removed, and you have now electricity tariff reform and fuel reform going on. So Dubai really led the way. 2011 was when they did their electricity tariff reform, but in the last few years, you see all these changes taking place. And so now you have in Saudi Arabia this ESCO industry that is now budding, and it's really reliant on the tariff reform that's been going on in Saudi Arabia. In Oman, most recently in January of 2017, just last year, they had a tariff reform where they have their largest 10,000 electricity customers are now subject to a time of use cost-reflective tariff. What that means is the electricity tariff in the peak hours of the peak months goes up to as much as 20 cents per kilowatt hour. Now that's a huge incentive now for large companies, industries, or commercial buildings to now perform building retrofits to save energy through operational savings, whatever it is. So we need to have this tariff reform take place throughout the GCC and throughout the MENA region. That will then enable programs to be developed and established, things like Takati, things like Ittihad Super ESCO. We have Ras Al Khaimah now, making reforms or making efforts to have a program for efficiency. So it's the subsidies and it's also the programs that will come into place. Yeah.
And Leen, from an outsider's perspective looking in, where do you see this transformation going?
Okay, thank you very much in first instance for being here, for inviting me and sharing some of our experience from Europe. As was also addressed by the former speakers, in Europe we have quite a complex urban structure. So our cities have been growing organically since more than 100 years. Our building stock has been renovated or built new, and we have a whole complex building stock of all different building types and so on. And as I see it here, energy efficiency becomes high on the agenda, but the first market to enter, of course, is this one of the large commercial buildings where the energy cost is very well known and is a very big part of the total cost of operating such buildings. But where we in Europe already worked quite hard on these large commercial buildings, the real challenge is in also the renovation of the residential sector. And there we have quite some experience in Europe with the whole diversity of the building stock in our cities to look at very specific and targeted approach to this building sector or this part of our building stock, where the absolute amount of energy and energy cost is lower, but nevertheless the savings are in the same relative amount. So this is, I think, the next market to enter with very specific approaches.
And Nada, you have experience both in Europe as well as the Middle East. What are the best practices, do you think, that can be replicated here?
Exactly. So first of all, I'm very happy about the initiatives that are in place today. Not only it started with Dubai in 2013, but now they are expanding in all the Emirates, and we are seeing the example of Saudi Arabia, which is taking also interest in energy efficiency. We as Saint-Gobain we have been working on energy efficiency for so long now. And we have R&D program that target to reduce the energy consumption of a building by insulating its envelope. The best practices is to look at the building as a whole. The envelope is key, and we need to approach the building from a building science perspective. We need to study the envelope and treat it, first of all, eliminate all the thermal bridges, the problems of air tightness of the envelope, so that is saving as much energy as possible. We in Saint-Gobain have several initiatives, several R&D program that were at first focused 40 years ago on cold climates, but today we are focusing also on hot climates such as the region here, because it's the same complexity and same huge energy saving that we can get. And also we have in Saint-Gobain an initiative that called SCARE4, which aims to reduce the energy consumption and carbon footprint, reduce it by 4 of all of our warehouses, headquarters, plants, etc., to show an example and to show that the development of our solution is well performing and can achieve alone 40–50% of energy saving in buildings.
And also an interesting point that has been brought up before, another mentioned earlier as well, is the buildings here and the urbanization policy has been one where this situation of being concerned about energy efficiency was not factored in. This environment was not built into the system. So how do you create this sort of like sudden shift, so to speak?
Yeah, that's absolutely a very valid point. I mean, the existing building stock in the UAE currently, which didn't really overgone any of the building energy efficiency measures, which were for new buildings, is almost around 90% of the building stock are existing. So yes, there is a movement towards the new buildings regulations, and the other move which started around maybe 10 years ago, and there is another movement now, as was mentioned even by the panel discussion earlier, towards the existing buildings and how we need really to tackle this industry and this field in terms of existing building, and how to shift now between an inefficient building towards an efficient one. There are many measures, and we can talk about some examples, like any existing building. It has a lifetime, for example, for their existing equipment, and one of the main issues which should be taken care of by building owners and facility managers is once we reach the end of lifetime of these equipment, we need really to think to invest one time, and this investment will be towards changing the existing equipment, replacing them, and finding the correct systems and correct solutions, and do it as one investment all in all. So this is one example, and there are of course many other examples, like studying the building behavior, for example. And by studying the building behavior itself, you can really have many challenges there in saving energy, and in understanding how the people are operating within the building, and relating this to the equipment which are really consuming energy in this building.
What do you think, Ridah?
I mean, I think there's an increased role for government, I would say. So, I mean, you could use the carrots or you could use the sticks. And I'll give you a couple of examples of some policies, some programs that have been done internationally. So in New York City, for example, very recently, within the last few months, they've really made a big push for green. Now, New York City has many, buildings, many more than Dubai, and for much older. They've been around for much longer time. So they're focusing on the most inefficient 14,500 buildings. And they have put in place a regulation which basically says if you have a 1 million square foot building and you do not retrofit your building, you are facing fines of over $1 million, $2 million per year, if you do not retrofit that building and actually improve yourself from the least performing to one of the top performing. So it's a very, strong policy, and that's if you want a kick, that's going to be a kick for any large commercial building in New York City to now actually look at retrofits and actually realize that they could do this cost effectively. So that's one way to do it with a stick. In terms of carrots, you have, for example, in Europe, you have different incentives and policies in place to incentivize ISO 50001, which is an energy management system, which basically helps you to continually improve your energy performance. So if you perform an energy audit or you have an ISO 50001 certification, you actually will avoid a tax penalty, basically. And so you have this huge adoption of these energy performance improvements going on in Europe because of this. So there's different ways the government can really stimulate the growth, and that's what I would like to see more.
And Leen, was there the sort of like carrot and stick approach in Europe? I mean, here governments like Saudi Arabia, they're looking to subsidize and they're looking to ease this policy in. Did you see penalties enforced to get people in line, or was there a subsidy regime at some point?
Definitely. So the role of our public authorities is not to be underestimated, and in creating awareness is one thing, but then indeed incentivize. Of course, we have already since long time building regulations on the energy efficiency of our buildings, but for retrofitting the existing building stock, that's something else. You can't punish for people for choices they made in the past without knowing or complying at that time with regulations, but also our regulations progress towards in line with the innovations that are possible. So awareness raising and incentivizing by subsidies was definitely a very important measure that was taken in Europe. What we see now is that also private players come into the picture in offering and incentivizing people how to retrofit their homes. I give an example. In Europe, it's become quite easy to shift from energy supplier to another one. And so we have a liberalized market, and we see that energy suppliers are really looking at new solutions to increase the loyalty of the customers, because customers, they go shopping, they go for the lowest energy price, and they go shopping. And we see energy suppliers coming into the retrofit market by having partnerships with contractors who are in retrofit business, and they offer extra services to their clients to say, okay, I see you're consuming that much. According to my information, I think this could be improved. Can we have, please, we can make an offer of renovating your houses. And you see such private companies also coming into the market and making people aware of the advantages and the cost saving they can make, and also offer new business for them, because the energy market, only by selling kilowatt hours and gas, is not a sustainable business for them anymore.
Before I go on to the others about identifying buildings that could be retrofitted here, I just wanted to get an idea from Nada on the sort of competition you have when it comes to insulating buildings here. How competitive is the market right now for a private player like you here?
Yeah, it is competitive. The market is competitive, and we see in the market a lot of solutions today that are not very well performing. Example, we have the old stock of building, which is non-insulated, but also which is insulated not properly. The solution that I'm talking about is that they target a part of the building, but not all the building together. So this is why we are focusing on the importance and awareness of the external insulation of the whole building for the facade and the roof, in order to eliminate the thermal bridges that are occurring in other systems in the market, such as the AAC block, for example, or the insulated block, which focus on a certain part of the building and not all of it. So we draw awareness, we do a lot of studies. We have made some studies in Kuwait comparing different systems and showing the advantages of on energy saving, but also on moisture management, because if you have thermal bridges or you have some weak points in your building, you have the moisture management problem. So you have the problem of mold growth and fungus, which will deteriorate the structure of your building and make it less durable. So we have a lot of awareness to draw on the different stakeholders in the market, including also the ESCOs, to show that deep retrofitting is very important. It's not only by changing, it's very important to change, of course, the electrical and mechanical equipment, but also we need to target the main electricity consuming in a building, which is the cooling demand. So we need to lower it, we need to lower the peak demand in order to not need newer or bigger power plants for the country. So there are some very important strategies that we are targeting for that.
Also, the Middle East here has very different climatic conditions to other parts of the world, very severe and sometimes really extreme, even during summers. Some summers can be extremely warm, others not. So how do you adapt practices to this, to a very different region to the others, if you can share your experiences working in this?
Yeah, you know, we have actually worldwide, there is also some, we have actually invited the Refrigerant International Forum for Refrigerant for high hot and humid climates. How does it perform in this region? So there was a summit by the United Nations held here in the UAE regarding this matter. So by collaborating with the international societies, with the United Nations, there are movements here to understand how, one example is how refrigerant, for example, works in such a hot and severe, as you said, climate. And not only here, actually, this climate is also, you can find similar climates in the US, for example, you know, plus or minus. And in the same way, you know, we are just trying here in this region to understand how these technologies are and could be enhanced in the region.
I had a very interesting conversation with someone a while ago about the Kigali Amendment and how countries around the world are moving towards that. Is that being taken seriously here? Do you see that factoring in building regulations at all?
I'm not aware of it, this Kigali movement.
I'm not sure about the details of that, to be honest, of the government. I do know it's something that I know, for example, Kuwait does have a delegation and they are participating in that amendment, but the exact details I'm not sure of either, actually.
No, I'm sorry.
It's basically about phase out of harmful refrigerants from the ozone layer. And I believe it's something that the Middle East is slowly adapting to, which takes me to another aspect of retrofitting that can be targeted, such as air conditioning or lighting. What are the less obvious examples that can produce like greater efficiencies in energy savings?
We can talk about building behavior, for example. This is something which maybe people don't look at it too much, and this is very much significant in terms of reducing energy. We need to understand how the building performs during the day, during the night, late at night. We need to know what is on, what is off, and this understanding of the building will really lead to huge opportunities of energy savings. So this is one example, and you know, there are many examples like Nada mentioned regarding the building envelope, for example. Yes, it is expensive. However, it leads also to more indoor air comfort and environmental comfort, as well as energy saving.
What is your take on this, Ridah?
Yeah, I mean, I would second that, actually. So behavioral is something that I think we need to look more in this region. And I mean, ultimately, people are people, you know, whether it's the GCC or North America or Europe. So an example of behavioral approach is a company called Opower, right? So Opower based in the USA. And what they found is they've done a lot of, work with utilities in the US. And they found that the biggest incentive for somebody to use less energy at their home in the residential sector, which is the toughest sector to really get savings from, it's not if you give them some money, but rather it's to tell them that your neighbor is doing better than you. You know, it's a behavioral approach, and they have a lot of good, data scientists along with behavioral scientists working together on this. And so that actually incentivizes them, and they're able to show, very good savings, as if you're replacing equipment, but you're actually dealing with people, and it's just this aggregate of people that generates the savings. So that's one thing. The second, I would say, is just with the lowering of the cost of sensors going down now. You could really get these real-time, understanding of what your usage is. And that's going to lead to a lot of savings on its own as well, right? So those are the two things.
What about you, Leen?
I was also going to address the aspect of user behavior and getting smartness into the system, because we are talking here on energy efficiency, but we sometimes say that flexibility will be the new energy efficiency. So if we have more and more renewables coming into the system, which are not constantly available, but we need to adapt our our energy use and energy demand towards the supply from the renewable sources we have, we also need to shift our energy use from between time periods. And so the smartness that my colleague here is pointing out, getting sensors and getting, for example, that just shut the lights off if nobody is present in a room, which is a very easy example, will also be necessary to shift behavior from peak time to lower demand periods. And so we strongly believe that the smartness will also help to not have the awareness of the user, but just have appliances react on their own. And we once did a large pilot project in Belgium on demand-side measures and having smartness, and we compared a large group of people whose appliances were really smart and programmed in such a way that they delivered the services that they were supposed to deliver, but at the time that was in line with the tariffs of the electricity. And then we had a group we compared, which had to be aware of shifting their demand by themselves. And the difference is huge. The group that wasn't supported by technology, after a week, they forget that they should do their washing machine during the night instead of during the day, during peak time. So if we can support with this smartness, not only the energy efficiency and shut off the lights when there is nobody present, but also shift peak demands to other periods, that would be a very, very interesting technology.
Also for Saint-Gobain, the retrofitting is not only energy saving, but we look at it from another perspective, which is enhancing the multi-comfort for the occupants, a subject that our delegate spoke about this morning, which is the multi-comfort criteria. So we look in renovating the building in order to achieve thermal comfort for the occupants, acoustical comfort, visual comfort, and good air quality. For instance, one of the key points is also the glazing. I talked about the wall insulation, but the glazing is also a hot topic here in this country, because we like to have buildings with nice big facades. And so we in Saint-Gobain have several research programs in order to achieve a highly performant glazing with also good natural lighting, providing good natural lighting. In order not to use the artificial lighting so much. And also we see the retrofitting also as a point for durable building, and also we targeted today, there is the question of fire safety. You know that we had unfortunate events of fire that happens in towers recently, and we look at it, if we want to renovate the building to achieve the energy savings, why not also look at the facade and see if there are any problem of combustible material used in this facade, and then take the advantage of replacing them with non-combustible one. So if you want, it's several criteria that we look at, and that will help to reduce the return on investment when looking at retrofitting a building, because the comfort of occupants is priceless, and it's directly linked to the productivity, to the health of the occupants, etc.
And Nada, you also wanted to talk about the sick building syndrome.
Yes.
How can you identify that, and how can you do that in this region?
Yeah, so my colleague can also talk. It's widely known in Europe. We say the sick building syndrome. Some buildings have a lot of moisture problem due to not focusing on the air tightness or the moisture management in a building. So it's very important when studying a building to look at the envelope and to do some tests that are very easy in order to check if the building is really sick, and then we have to treat it by renovating it. So it's really important to look at it in the perspective of a sick building which needs to be treated.
And Another important point that was raised earlier is the slow phase-in of these power tariffs, which have actually not made it, not incentivized people to adopt to energy efficiencies fast enough. Do you think that's one of the problems holding back on a larger deployment of energy efficiency schemes?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is a very important factor. I mean, in this sector and in different industries across the region, the GCC region. Mainly maybe in the public sector, maybe in the public buildings, I mean,
Yeah.
and the villa premises. So there is a huge sector which is totally, not looking into this matter through the financial point of view, and they are just looking at it from the interest point of view. For example, we have projects, we are doing some projects which are in terms of energy efficiency and energy conservation measures, but this is not because of the tariffs or because of the financial incentives. It is because of the interest of the owner to do it. So once this tariffs are not subsidized anymore, and then the movement will also increase towards this energy efficiency. So for sure, this has a very important role. I mean, in enhancing people and encouraging people towards energy efficiency.
Yeah, I mean, I can't emphasize it enough. I think it's the most important thing. And so as part of the Energy Efficiency Working Group for the Clean Energy Business Council, what we've produced is a white paper on energy efficiency, looking at residential space, commercial buildings, industrial and transportation. And part of that study, we actually looked at the tariffs across the GCC, and we put them all on one graph. So it's on our website. It's an interactive chart. You could actually look and see how the tariffs are different in each of the countries. And I'm just looking at the numbers. I mean, if you're at 1 cent per kilowatt hour in Bahrain for nationals, you're not going to have much energy savings coming from that segment. Similar thing with Abu Dhabi, similar thing with Sharjah. Kuwait is less than 2 cents per kilowatt hour. Meanwhile, you have Diwa and Dubai is starting at 8 cents per kilowatt hour and going up to 12 cents per kilowatt hour. So until you have the rest of the countries performing that reform and tackling those, they can be very sensitive issues. In Kuwait, for example, there's a lot of back and forth. They try to get the reforms and then the parliament pushes back. But you need to have that take place in order to have these incentives and to have savings take place. Yeah.
Yes, and we come in Europe. We came from a complete different how to say, benchmark compared to the situation here, of course. So it will be essential to make the shift. It's only we have to look at it in combination with renewable energy as well. And so energy efficiency is one thing, flexibility is another thing, but the third pillar is renewable energy. Yeah? These are the three options in the ultimate target of lowering CO2 emissions of our built environment. And there will be competition between the three of them. Because they all have their value, and of course the price you pay for the electricity consumed, it might be better to produce the electricity yourself with solar panels on your roof. So these are the three possibilities which you will have to look from a combined perspective and a balanced portfolio of energy efficiency, renewables and flexibility.
I mean, she raised an interesting point about off-grid, utilization of electricity. Is that something that has really taken off anywhere in the UAE? Have we seen consumers think about deploying solar panels, or are the prices still prohibitively high for them to do that, to make that initial investment and save up on costs later?
The initiative already started in Dubai. The regulations already are set down, and there's a scheme, regarding this whole topic. And there is actually, to tackle on the previous point before we talk about this, there is also another issue, which is the tenant and the owner.
Yeah.
So the tenant is paying the fees, the tenant is paying the energy consumption fees, and the owner should do the retrofit. And here's another challenge which need really to be addressed as well. And maybe one of the ways that can be addressed by labeling the buildings, by labeling the apartments or the villas, so that the tenant will have an idea about his energy consumption in the future if he's going to rent this building. And this will affect, of course, the the rental fees. So this might be a way, other than, the most important way, as my colleague mentioned, is to enforce the regulations and to mandate these regulations so that owners will do it in any case. However, this is another way also to have a financial incentive behind it and to go for smart grids and to go for other initiatives and implement them in their buildings or in their apartments, so that they can reduce the energy consumption. Regarding smart grid, of course, there is a huge market regarding this. It just started now, and it will take time until it catches. But there are maybe around more than 150 contractors registered in Dubai as in Shams Dubai, for example, for smart grid contractors, and there is around maybe 20 or 15 consultants in this sector already registered and passed the accreditation process.
Yeah, I mean, I think for solar, it definitely makes sense in Dubai, and you see this slow now adoption taking place. In other countries, it's going to depend on the payback, and that will then open up the market. So for example, we're working with a client in Oman who is now doing energy efficiency measures because they have this tariff reform, because they're now facing this very high peak tariff, and they want to install 4 megawatts of solar power, right? But when we reached out to the companies in Dubai, whether they would, come in and potentially finance it, they would not, because even though they have the peak tariff is very high, their base tariff is still very low in the winter months and the non-peak hours. They have to basically finance it themselves. So you won't have this adoption across the region until they really see the financial incentive in place. And even when the financial incentive is in place, like in places like Dubai, it's still a slow adoption because you have this heavy learning curve and you have these other structural issues, things like tenants are always leaving or those types of issues,
That's an interesting point, because we have a very transient population here in the UAE, particularly in Dubai. So is there an opportunity for residential communities and real estate developers to really take the initiative and retrofit? And have you seen that kick off in some of the managed communities like Arabian Ranches, the Greens? Is there any move towards that? Do you think these are opportunities that could be leveraged here?
There is a move actually towards the residential sector, but not what really is required. I mean, not the move that is required towards achieving high targets in this sector. One of the issues that can be also implemented here is having, for example, the manufacturers, engaging them in financing these initiatives in regards for solar energy, for example, and photovoltaic cells. Having the manufacturers invest and making a scheme. I mean, like what is happening, for example, in the UK, and putting their and installing their units and charging the customer or taking portion of the savings. This will improve the payback period, because the payback of this photovoltaic cells is around 7 to 8 years in some cases. So and this is a huge payback period for the residential sector. The main way maybe to really go into this sector is by having the manufacturers. This is one of the solutions, installing their units and sharing the cost saving with the tenant or with the owner.
I mean, from my perspective, I think definitely more needs to happen. I think more education needs to happen for these communities, because right now it probably just relies on champions. You have maybe one person who knows what energy efficiency can do and how it can help, and maybe this champion will go to the homeowners association and advocate for a project and put things together, and all that really needs to be in place already, so that we don't rely on these single person champions, so that they realize that they could not only save money over the long term, but they could also get some really serious health benefits, right? They could avoid some of the sick building syndrome that maybe they don't even realize that that is taking place. So more education, more awareness needs to happen. We're definitely not there yet.
Before I take closing comments, I'll just ask if anyone has any questions. No? Just quick comments from all the panelists on the challenges this market faces and also what sort of opportunity you see developing here going forward from this year. I'll start from you, Nada.
Yeah, so we are very happy about the retrofitting initiatives that coming out from the government, and we have some really exciting projects that we want to work on to demonstrate how the solution that we provide have a very good impact on energy saving, on the multi-comfort criteria that I talked about, on the safety of the building, So, of course, we have to do a lot of awareness on several stakeholders, not only the clients, the developers, but also the consultant, work with them. And we have done a lot of effort with the designers in order to show them our innovation and talk about the benefits behind it. Also, we have we are targeting the applicators and the contractors, because it's very important to have good systems, but know how to implement them, because otherwise you wouldn't have the same benefits. So we have several interesting projects, and hopefully we can also showcase some of these innovation and work in our multi-comfort house in Masdar, which will soon be built, because we will have a part of it which is retrofitted, so an old constructed, built as a old construction type, and then retrofit, and then we will monitor and show how much important it is on several aspects of it.
Leen?
I think targeting the residential market is a very, very difficult one, but a very necessary one. It is complex to show return on investment of energy efficiency, because very much dependent on the structure of the buildings, which is can be completely different from one building to another, but also the end user behavior. So finding the right tools and models to make sure that you have a very accurate view on the building stock and the energy use of it, and making sure that you do the right measures in increasing energy efficiency is a challenging next step, I think, in improving energy efficiency of the built environment over here, and happy to share the tools and ideas that we use there in Europe.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, in terms of opportunity, I mean, it's just a huge market. There's money to be made, so it's an $8 billion market in the United States, the ESCO industry by itself. So if building owners will just realize that their buildings, their assets it's a bank, and they just need to utilize that. Otherwise, money is just flying away when they're using inefficient equipment. In terms of challenges, I would say, we just need to move forward incrementally. Even if it's something is not perfect, you're not putting a perfect program in place. Put together a good program, put together some metrics, measure progress, and then get better and change the program over time. You don't have to do something perfect. Oftentimes, things slow down to a halt just because of paralysis by analysis or bureaucracy, and we just need to find a way to just take those incremental steps forward.
Azmi?
I would like to highlight one concern, and I will second actually Nada's opinion regarding the indoor environmental comfort. So sustainability is not actually saving energy as is. It is actually utilizing energy in an efficient manner to achieve what we need to achieve in terms of indoor air comfort and indoor environmental comfort. So there are many attempts being taken by facilities management companies or engineers to reduce energy by compromising the indoor air comfort or indoor environmental comfort by switching off the fresh air handling units. So this also need to be look after, and we need to understand these issues, and I'm sure many do already. So in order to make sure that we don't compromise the indoor environmental quality. And again, regarding the building regulations and mandated regulations, I think this is one of the important things that will push this segment and will have it reach faster whatever what we need really to reach in terms of energy efficiency.
A big thank you to our panelists and also for our audience for staying with us for one of the last sessions at WEFIS and at Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week. It's been a really good learning experience. It's good to hear about municipality strategies and also what's being done on the ground, and also how the market is growing slowly but steadily, and hopefully in 5 years' time when we convene again, it'll be a different market, and I look forward to
Thank you.
convening then and having a chat with all of you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.